Hello everyone, tonight we're going to step quietly into the dim early light of a world without zippers, plastic, or running water. You've been up since before the rooster could form a full sentence. The frost still clings to the window glass. That wide, stiff cloth wrapped around your waist is not a fashion statement. It's your toolbox, your cupboard, your privacy screen, your Kleenex, and probably your therapist if things go badly today. Your feet are already sore, your back is hinting at betrayal and breakfast? Well, it's somewhere between yesterday's bread and the bucket of cold water by the hearth. But none of that matters because right now you're focused on your apron. And you probably won't survive this, at least, not if you try to wash 12 shirts by hand in freezing creek water without completely losing your sense of humor. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. That thing weighs as much as a toddler and smells worse than your brother's boots. Her own apron is flapping too, sagging heavy with who knows what. You wonder if hers also contains a piece of cheese she forgot she was saving. That happened once. It was blue by the time you remembered. And women would gather to help each other beat the ever-loving daylight out of garments with wooden paddles. Historians are still debating whether this was for cleaning or for passive-aggressively working out marital frustration. It always is. You find a twist of thread from Tuesday, a thistle seed from who knows where, and oh yes, a sprig of rosemary that once flirted with a pie but never made it in. You crush it between your fingers. Smells like memory. You've got exactly one nice dress, and it only comes out for funerals and arguments with the magistrate. Still smells like regret and ash, but better than before. The sun's climbing now, pale and slow, and you can feel your stomach rumbling. You made it weeks ago, boiling fat down with ashes and whispering a prayer that it wouldn't explode in the kettle. It didn't. That's a small miracle. You tuck it back inside your apron, snug and safe. You pull a crust of bread from your apron pocket. Yes, it's a little linty, but the chickens don't seem to mind as you break it and scatter crumbs. They rush in like judgmental clouds and feathers. Not just with water, with your morning. There's something grounding about it. Something that says, yes, you forgot to comb your hair, and yes, there's a chicken in the kitchen again, but look, you did something today, with your work. The apron clings slightly, damp and proud. It's heavy now, but not unpleasantly so. More like a badge. A saturated, slightly smelly badge of your unspoken brilliance. Into the rinse water it goes, and you reach into your apron again. This time, you find a small wedge of soap you'd broken off earlier. Lucky you. It's still dry. You feel oddly victorious. Everything else is fair game for dirt, baby spit, goat hair, or the suspicious grease stain that's taken up permanent residence on your hem. You've got at least 4 more shirts to do, and one of them still has last week's mutton stew crusted in the cuffs. You squatted too close to the stream earlier, and now your knees feel like they've absorbed half of England. There's a rhythmic sound to the scrub of shirts against the washboard, like rain pattering on a wooden roof. It's kind of soothing until your fingers brush against something slimy. You hope it's just moss. It belongs to your husband, who insists on wiping his hands on it after dealing with the fireplace, the pigs, or both. You sigh, you might as well wash the man with it. Or at least something shaped like an eel and possibly edible. You consider fetching a coin from your apron, but then you remember you used your last penny to buy thread. Your children needed mended sleeves more than questionable pastry. You've tucked the lye soap into your apron, no fancy label, just a greasy, pale lump of homemade strength that doubles as stain remover, surface cleaner, and probably dessert if someone's desperate enough. And let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Always love to see who's still awake out there. Now, let's turn off the lights, turn on the fan to some soothing background music, and enjoy the evening ride together. Your knuckles are already cracked by the time you haul the wash tub outside. The apron pocket is damp, of course. Your apron flaps in the wind, threatening to turn into a wet flag of surrender, but you tighten it, tuck the soap back in. Across the yard, a neighbor waves no words, just a chin lift. Soap gets on your skirt again, doesn't matter. Here's a strange fact. In some English households, laundry day was a full community affair. Either way, it worked. You pull the shirt from the bucket and sniff. There's something deeply weird about the way aprons absorb everything. They're like time travel pockets. The last shirt is the worst. Your apron, by the way, is soaked. A cart rattles past on the lane. Someone selling eel pies, you think? You dump the last of the rinse water and hang the shirts like ghosts on a line. The apron still holds one last thing, a cloth-wrapped bar of the lye soap, carefully pressed and dried. As you walk back toward the house, you run your hand over the front of the apron, feeling the bumps and weight inside. A soap-scented sigh escapes your lips. You probably won't survive the week's washing, but you did today. Your hands are still wrinkled from the wash when you sit down to mend a torn shift, the cold thread biting your fingertips. But before you can get a single stitch in, your apron shifts. There's a tiny pouch nestled deep in the seam. In the 18th century, pins are not tossed around like modern thumbtacks. No plastic wheels of 500-count safety pins from a dollar store. No, these are serious business. Imported, hand-drawn, and sold in bunches that cost what most folks earn in a week. Pins are rare. Pins are power. You've been known to trade one for bread. You tug it loose, and there they are, your pins, glorious, sharp, surprisingly valuable pins. You roll one between your fingers like it's spun gold. Honestly, it may as well be. Your little pouch holds perhaps 20. Bent, slightly rusty, still deadly. And not just for sewing bees or your everyday tools. A pop stay? The needle keeps sliding, and you keep forgetting which stitch you were on. Eventually, you realize you're staring at the pins instead of using them. They're just so useful. Pin it. It's not perfect, nothing you do ever really is, but it holds. That's the point. You smooth it out and tuck it aside, satisfied. A little blood on the tip. You shrug and poke it back in place. Others stored them in cakes of wax. And yet others, your kind, just risked minor bodily harm daily and kept them in the closest fabric container available. You dug like a mole, muttering curses and kicking at dandelions. It earns a smirk and a slow blink. You're not performing for anyone here, except maybe the mice. Found it a week later in the pig trough, no explanation, just floating there mocking you. You sewed it into your apron after that. A pin pricks your side again. You ignore it. You make a mental note, another chore for another pocket. One of the pins has worked its way loose and jabbed you in the hip. You curse under your breath, bite your lip, and try to find the little beast. It's stuck in the lining, of course. You do the awkward dance of apron twisting, and finally it comes loose. It's better that way. People borrow pins like they borrow sugar forever. Baby's cloth too loose? Pin it. Needing to seal off a letter or hide a lock of hair? Pin it. She's got her apron cinched tight and something wrapped carefully in the fold. You nod at her and she nods back. You both know the truth. You're walking toolboxes, weaponized women with sharp things hidden in cotton armor, tried baskets. But nothing beats the humble apron for daily utility. It's like a traveling desk. A folding cabinet. A pocket dimension made entirely of string and crumbs. You've probably saved your dignity at least 10 times just this week with a well-placed jab. The dog gives you a suspicious look, like he knows you're about to enforce something. Probably because he just ate one of the leftover biscuits and he's trying to look innocent. You reach into your apron and produce what else? A pin. You use it to open a sealed paper of dried herbs. He watches. You whisper, "Don't even think about it," and he slinks off. You keep them tucked between layers of linen, stitched into a narrow slit that even your own children don't know about. You sigh and poke one into the cloth for safekeeping, trying not to stab yourself in the thigh. Again. Out the window, the light is shifting. It's not quite noon, but the fire is already begging for more wood. Funny thing is, you've tried pouches. Your pins jingle as you walk into the kitchen. Back at the table, the shift glares at you. You sit again and try to mend the tear. One time, years ago, you lost the whole pouch in the yard. You try a joke to yourself. If pins could talk, they'd be very sharp. The shift is coming along, finally. Neat little lines of stitches, one by one. And just when you're about to get up, you feel the pinch. Not emotional, actual. You hold it up, triumphant, like a warrior with a tiny sword. Another historical nugget for your weary brain. Some households kept pins in locked boxes, doled out only during sewing hour. Historians are still debating whether this widespread pin hoarding was due to economics or pure generational trauma. Could be both. Later, as you go out to gather kindling, you pass another housewife. There's something comforting in that. A little dangerous too. When you reach the woodpile, you grab a bundle, tuck a few splinters into your apron folds, and keep going. You're used to it. You're standing in the yard, apron flapping in the breeze like a slightly judgmental flag. The firewood sits balanced on your hip, but your other hand is already inside that endless pocket, feeling around for the crumbs you saved this morning. Not for you, of course. These are for the chickens. You toss a few bits onto the grass-stale crust pie flake shrapnel, a generous pinch of something that might have been yesterday's oat mash. The hens descend like tiny dragons, beady-eyed and terrifyingly focused. You step back. You've seen what they do to beetles. You like the weight of it. If you gave it a proper shake, it could probably plant an herb garden on its own. Today, the crumbs jingle against something harder. You reach in and fish out a round, smooth pebble, the lucky one. You run your thumb over it out of habit, probably hoping you'll trip and spill something edible. You love them, you really do. But they're not above violence. It's not particularly beautiful, just a pale river stone, worn soft from years of being handled, dropped, forgotten, and found again. Some tied ribbons around them. Others painted faces on them and gave them names. Historians are still debating whether these were folk beliefs or just the result of intense loneliness paired with surplus imagination. Probably both. Either way, they worked. It's seen you through hard mornings and full moons. It even sat in your apron when the midwife came last winter. You gripped it like a lifeline, and now it's just a rock again. But it matters. Your apron is an ecosystem. But no, all you find is a curled bit of paper with the recipe for rose vinegar and a dead beetle. You sigh, 2 steps forward, 1 step into insect residue. Some things you don't let go of so easily. Grease, flour, water, chicken feather. Someone should write a novel on it. In smudges, maybe you picked it up on the day the cow finally calved. You groan and fan the ashes, slipping a few splinters from your apron into the grate. The flint's dull. The sparks are lazy. You smile. It's the one your daughter gave you after she said it looked like a tiny potato. You've kept it ever since. Mostly to remind yourself that joy doesn't always look polished. You whisper curses too soft for the children to hear and consider lighting the whole apron on fire just to feel something. Either way, it's yours now, a superstition? And you are. A small heel of cheese, now tragically melted, and a slightly bruised apple you keep meaning to eat. You hum a little tune, partly to pass time, partly to warn off anything weird that might live down there. You've heard stories. Of course, you don't believe them, mostly. It's been in there long enough to qualify for tenancy. Definitely. But in a world where butter refuses to churn and roof leaks appear overnight, you're allowed a little harmless magic. You can't remember where it came from. Maybe your grandmother gave it to you. You tuck it back into the corner fold. As you walk toward the well, your apron knocks against your thighs in that steady rhythm that says, yes, you're getting things done, but also you're definitely hiding snacks in there again. The bucket creaks on the winch as you lower it into the dark. You just dried those. And now they're soaked again. Add it to the list of daily indignities. Right under rooster crowed at 3 a.m. for no reason and lost my spoon to a suspiciously fast raccoon. Water sloshes as you haul it back up, wetting your shoes. You scowl. On the walk back, the hens follow you. You glance down at the stone in your apron again. There's something grounding about it, literally. Here is a weird little fact to rattle around your tired brain. Some 18th century. Women carried touchstones or blessing pebbles in their aprons, thought to absorb pain or misfortune. Back in the house, the fire is out again. Eventually, the fire catches. You sit back, exhale, and wipe your hands on the apron, which is already a map of your morning. You reach into the deep seam again, thinking maybe just maybe you remembered to tuck that sweet biscuit in there. But then your fingers brush another pebble. Not your lucky one, this one's jagged, cool, rough around the edges. Another chicken pecks at the door. Not now, you mutter. Try again at lunch. You shake out your apron carefully over the floorboards, letting crumbs and feathers fall like gentle confetti. The stones stay put. And somewhere in all this quiet chaos, you feel the day moving forward again just a little. Just enough. You're peeling potatoes at the back table when you feel it again, that odd little crunch tucked into the side of your apron. You pause, hands dripping with starch, and reach in. There it is, that twig, the same one as yesterday. Same shape, same length, same annoying way it stabs you in the ribs when you bend over too fast. The kids are out somewhere probably trying to catch frogs in the neighbor's pond again. But still, your hand tightens around the twig like it's a secret someone dared you to notice. At first, you thought it was a bit of kindling. Then maybe a leftover from some herbal bundle. But now you're convinced it has a purpose. And that someone else put it there. You glance around the kitchen. It's empty except for a half-filled pail and a very judgmental cat on the windowsill. And tied to it with a thread faint but unmistakable is a note. Folded once, small, carefully wedged between two splinters of bark. Hazel twigs for clarity, hawthorn for protection. Elm if you wanted to know someone's secrets. Of course, most of it was half-remembered superstition passed through gossip in grain markets. No words, just a faint charcoal smudge of something vaguely bird-shaped, or maybe a branch. It's hard to say. You turn it sideways. Still nothing. Add it to the layer of ash from this morning and the faint red wine stain that has been haunting your middle for 2 months now. The apron tells your day before you even speak. Or maybe because it was the only entertainment between butter churnings. That's a mystery seed you've meant to identify. There it is. The knife's blunt, but it works. You cut the meat into chunks and hum quietly to the rhythm. Or maybe it's just the slow madness of a housewife with too many chores and not enough adult conversation. You consider burning it, then decide it's better left as is. Either way, you'll keep the twig. You've never been on a witch's bad side and you don't intend to start now. Once, a girl from down the lane gave you a pouch of thistle seeds for courage. He's got a suspicious habit of whistling and not making eye contact. You once found a dried violet in your apron after he passed by, never told anyone. Mostly because you're not entirely sure it wasn't yours to begin with. Another time, a boy left a single goose feather tied to a string and said nothing when you asked about it. Children are strange. Country children? Stranger. It's smooth in places, snapped on one end. You found 3 in as many days, each one tucked neatly into your apron when you weren't looking. There's the twig. And the note. And a few breadcrumbs that smell faintly of time. You pile them in your hand and turn each piece over, like you're solving a puzzle. That kind of stealth only comes from 2 kinds of people, trained spies. Or 10-year-olds with too much imagination and no siblings close in age. You sit down slowly, still holding a potato in your other hand, and peel the paper open with your thumb. Now, this wouldn't be the first time a neighbor's child left you something odd. But this twig? It's becoming a regular occurrence. You refold the paper, tuck it back into the apron pocket, and decide not to worry. Or rather, decide to worry later. You have potatoes to finish and a stew to build before someone comes home claiming they re-starving to death, again after playing stick wars in the meadow. As you peel, you recall a peculiar fact from a village over. Some women in the early 1700s swore that slipping twigs into an apron-specific types mind you could bring dreams or repel nightmares. Historians are still debating whether those beliefs were truly widespread, or if they were just the kind of whispered nonsense that gets remembered only because someone bothered to write it down. You poke the twig into the side of the bread bin. It balances there awkwardly, looking suspiciously ceremonial. Back to the stew. You tug your apron up to wipe your hands, smearing potato starch across the top. You fish around in the pocket for the little knife nope. That's a button. That's a feather. Outside, someone whistles. You glance toward the window but see only a shadow darting past. Probably the Miller boy again. Later, when the stew is bubbling and the cat has finally stopped glaring at you, you sit by the fire and empty your apron into your lap. What if they're not random? What if someone is trying to say something with gestures, with objects, with small daily intrusions that feel innocent but add up to a message? And then you laugh softly to yourself. A mystery, sure. You pat your apron flat and smile. Just in case. The twig from yesterday is still wedged in the bread bin this morning, watching you with the smug neutrality of all unexplained things. You ignore it as best you can, slipping into your apron like armor, tying the knot with a practiced ink that says, yes. It's far too early, and no, you haven't had your tea yet. Inside your apron pocket, beneath a fold of linen and a dried sage leaf you meant to toss out last week, there's a tangled wad of string. You've been saving it. Because string is one of those things that seems useless until it suddenly isn't. You wrap your fingers around it now, pulling the loop gently until it stretches out like a sleeping cat. It reminds you of the stable's hay and dust and horses who think they're clever. You smile just slightly, then move on. String like this has seen everything: mending hems, bundling herbs, hanging sprigs of lavender in the pantry, tucked into the deepest corner of the pocket like it knows it is not supposed to be seen. A small bundle of cloth, tied shut with red thread, filled with what feels like beans, seeds, dust. It's one of those things you just don't talk about in daylight. But you've seen other women reach into their aprons and pause, fingers brushing something with too much reverence to be a coin. You haven't opened it in years, and honestly, you don't plan to. It's heavier than you expected, sloshing dangerously. A splash hits your apron, leaving a new stain just above the hip. You consider adding the feather you found yesterday, still tucked into the windowsill. It's soft and gray, probably from the chicken that insists on sleeping inside the barn rafters. Maybe you will. One more harmless thing. You sigh, then press the fabric to your nose. It smells faintly of rosemary and smoke. This is what comfort smells like, you think, and perhaps a little superstition too. Others say they were invented on slow winter nights when women needed something to believe in besides cold floors and cranky husbands. No one else knows what's in it, mostly. You haven't broken a bone or lost a child. That counts for something. Not out of fear, well, maybe a little fear, but because it's tradition. It was your grandmother's. Before that, her mother's. You were told to never open it, only carry it. That's the rule. You sip it while watching your neighbor across the road wrestle with her laundry. Her apron is stained and sagging, same as yours. She waves, and you wave back. Neither of you speaks. It's too early for conversation. But you both know what you're carrying. And one particularly harrowing attempt to tie your son's boot back together after it exploded mid-run. Next to the string is another odd find, a single brittle strand of straw. It's less a garment now and more a spell. Or a diary, or both. Too coarse for weaving, too short for anything practical. You don't even remember where it came from, but here it is, making itself at home beside your broken chalk nub and that button you keep forgetting to reattach. You rub it between your fingers absently and catch a whisper of something sweet. And then, the charm. It's always there, right at the bottom. She said it was for protection or love. Or fertility. The story changed depending on the year. Once she claimed it kept away toothaches. Another time she said it helped with dreaming. Either way, it stays in your apron untouched like an old dog that doesn't bite but still looks at you like it might. You've never had the nerve to ask anyone else if they carry charms. Historians are still debating whether these little poppets or housewife charms were widespread or just local oddities. Some say they were remnants of pre-Christian traditions. You decide not to care what historians think. You care what works, and so far the charm has worked. The kettle screams at you from the hearth, and you grab the cloth-wrapped handle to move it off the heat. Tea today is strong and slightly bitter, thanks to a reused packet. You reach into your apron again, feeling the familiar tangle. String, straw, cloth. Your youngest walks in, tracking mud and joy, and hands you a fistful of wilted daisies. For your pocket, he says. You smile and accept them, shaking off the dirt and sliding them in beside the charm. Your apron is a strange mix today. String, straw, seeds, sage leaf, old charm, new flowers. And the best part? That's the real magic. By now, your apron's starting to sag like a hammock overloaded with forgotten chores. It clings to your waist with a weight that says, you've been carrying things you don't even remember putting in here. And that's entirely true. You're halfway through turning over the mattress, because why not add lower back trauma to your morning, when something thuds against your hip? The one you meant to eat yesterday. The one you peeled 3 days ago and then forgot inside your apron while chasing your youngest out of the bread oven. Alas, poor root. I knew you. Briefly. It's shriveled, a little bruised, and smells faintly like betrayal. A soft, squishy thud. You pause, reach in. And there it is. The turnip. There's jam near the hem from Tuesday's breakfast disaster. A smear of candle wax from when the firelight went out. Women stitched hidden pockets inside them, some as clever as false bottom drawers. Historians are still debating whether this was purely functional or a quiet rebellion against never having real pockets in their actual clothes. And the faint outline of your youngest dirty handprint eternally preserved like a cave painting. This thing has held eggs, spoons, soot, herbs, money, tears, and once a frog. Again, you don't even blink. Instead, you reach into your apron and pull out the muslin square like a magician producing a rabbit. You open the door and see your neighbor's eldest, red-faced, holding out something wrapped in paper. You dab at the dirt, listen to the dramatic sobs, and nod with the practiced grace of someone who's swiped 10,000 noses and has at least another 1,000 to go. You're still not sure how that got in there. You'll deal with it later. That's a future you problem. Straining jelly, covering bread. Acting as an impromptu eye patch when your son decided he was a pirate. You smooth it out now, then refold it and tuck it neatly back into the corner. You might need it later, not just any turnip the turnip. You sit down, finally, and your apron creaks under the weight of everything you've been tucking into it all morning. You decide it's time to do inventory. Your daughter cried into it last night when her favorite chicken pecked her toe. Again, you meant to dry it by the hearth. Instead, it rode around in your apron all night like an emotional support accessory. You hold it up like Hamlet contemplating the skull. You drop it into the slop bucket with a satisfying splat. The pigs will appreciate your forgetfulness. Not because it's all manageable, but because it's all yours. This chaos, this rhythm, this tangled apron of a life. Next up, you pull out a small mitten child-sized wool slightly damp. Not from snow, no, that's tears, and of course muslin. A folded square of it, soft, bleached, perfect for, well, anything really. Wiping faces. Some say the muslin square is the most versatile thing in a housewife's world aside from stubbornness. You agree. It's basically the 18th century version of duct tape. You pull your apron tighter around your waist and look down. It's a battlefield of stains and crumbs. A palimpsest of your entire week. One fact that gets left out of most history books, aprons weren't just protective layers. They were literal cargo nets. You give your apron a gentle pat and sigh. Outside, the sun's climbing higher. You open the door to let in some fresh air and hear a familiar squeal. One of the children is covered in mud. Then you hear the knock. A quiet one, tap tap. Mom says thank you for the pie, he mutters. You take the parcel nod, and when he disappears, you slip it into your apron without even checking what it is. Later that day, you're back by the hearth, poking at the stew. One damp mitten, folded muslin, cracked biscuit crumb. A red thread, origin unknown, 2 apple seeds, 1 stubborn turnip ghost. A paper parcel slightly warm. And somewhere near the bottom, a sliver of your own sanity. You smile. And as you sit with the stew bubbling gently behind you and the quiet murmur of the day winding down, you know one thing. If something matters, you'll carry it. Even if you forget it's there for a while. The wind's picked up outside, rustling the shutters and throwing leaves against the windows like nature's own gossip. But you don't notice at first because your apron is full of eggs. Not metaphorically, not emotionally, literally full. 5 warm, slightly dirty, gently clinking eggs, nestled inside your apron fold like precious jewels in a slightly smelly velvet pouch. Every step is calculated. Every pebble underfoot is a threat. You pause by the door, gently tilt your body so they roll into the deepest part of the fabric, then open the latch with your elbow like the apron has become your second set of arms. Honestly, it has. You've already sacrificed 2 eggs this week to gravity and poor footwear, and you're not losing any more today. You walk slowly, very slowly across the yard, arms tucked under the apron's edge, cradling it like a makeshift basket. You brush your apron down. It smells like henhouse, rosemary, and faint panic. The hen that laid the still warm one? She gave you a look that could curdle milk. Probably stew, judging by the floating bit of something that once identified as a carrot. You stir it absently and glance down at the apron again, which, in your experience, includes eggs, kittens, slippery soap, and sometimes your own exhaustion from the coop. Your apron isn't fancy, it's stitched linen, a little rough, a little faded. embroidered with clumsy daisies from your younger self who had time for such things. But today it carried potential life, food, warmth, something that, if dropped, would never be quite the same. You pick it out, but more has somehow appeared. Just enough to make you think about how many other fragile things your apron has held. A baby's first tooth and note from your sister. You never answered a crushed flower from a funeral you didn't want to attend. Aprons attract straw like cats attract judgment. You pull it out, consider tying your hair back with it, then remember the last time you tried that and ended up tangling yourself into a chair. Your apron folds over your legs, warm from your own body heat and the egg that hid in there too long. Because these things carry more than mess, they carry memory. You whispered a thank you anyway, because she seemed like the sort to hold a grudge. The tiny feather you didn't know you picked up, downy, still warm. Inside the apron, the eggs shift and tap like an impatient rhythm section. You make it inside, victory. The eggs go into the straw-lined bowl on the table, and you let out a breath you didn't realize you were holding. The cat will handle it. You see the suspicious one, the black hen with the wonky toe, staring at the door like she knows you still have her egg. You lift your apron slightly in mock salute, and she clucks in judgment, or eat it. You smile. It's warm, really warm. Still soft with life. You run a finger gently over its shell and wonder which hen left this one as a surprise. Probably the quiet one who stares too much. She's crafty. You think back to something your aunt used to say, a good apron carries things that don't want to be carried. In some villages, it's said that a cracked egg in the apron meant bad luck, especially if it ran down into your shoe. Historians are still debating whether that's folklore or just basic hygiene. Either way, you've tested it. It's unlucky. And cold. You reach into the apron again, and yes, there's one more egg hiding at the very bottom, tucked like it was trying to escape. It's not uncommon, you've heard, for women to gather eggs in their aprons daily, walking them back with the careful steps of someone transporting explosives. You leave the eggs and turn toward the fireplace, where something's bubbling. Soup? Stew? There's straw caught in the seam now. You think about the eggs. How strange it is, really, to carry something that fragile. That gets you a little sentimental, not too much. You reach in again, just crumbs now. And of course, that twist of red thread that's been lurking for 3 days like it owns the place. Instead, you flick it onto the windowsill. Outside, the chickens are back under the porch. Back at the table, you sit for just a minute, just long enough to rest your hands in your lap. You think, not for the first time, that someone should write poems about aprons, or odes, or battle chants. You reach into the corner pocket, just checking, and there it is. You don't know how it got there, but you smile. You're reaching for the carving knife when you remember again that it's dull. Again, you sigh, long and dramatic, as if maybe someone in the universe will hear your disappointment and send you a sharp blade by dove. It's cold and heavy and rests at the bottom of your apron like an anchor. And begin the slow rhythm of sharpening. Long, deliberate strokes, the stone whispering against metal with a hiss, hiss, hiss that somehow feels more alive than anything else in the room. You've had it for years, maybe decades. The edges are worn smooth now, but it still does the job. Instead, your hand slips into your apron, already knowing the shape it's searching for. The whetstone. You drop into the chair by the hearth, lay the knife across your lap, lighter than the whetstone. Softer, but not fabric. Then, just as your hand dips into your apron again to retrieve the cloth to wipe the blade, you feel something odd. From that first haircut, the one you tried to do with embroidery scissors after 2 cups of cider and no plan. You thought you'd lost this little token months ago. You searched drawers, the corners of the chest, under the kitchen bench. And here it is, nestled in the corner of your apron all this time, like the past tucked itself in and went to sleep. You tested on your thumb's edge, not enough to cut, just enough to check. It slices clean, satisfying. You head to the table and begin chopping. Onions first. Your eyes water almost immediately. Not just from the onions. Maybe a little from that curl of hair too. It's a bundle. Your hand wanders absently into the apron pocket, brushing over a splinter, a coin, a bit of dried rosemary. Life in pieces. You glance up, and for a moment the light catches the knife just so, sending a shimmer across the wall like a secret wink. The house smells of root vegetables and smoke. Your apron smells of iron and memories. You definitely didn't put it there. The bundle of hair light and fragile, both resting together like old friends. They make a strange pear sharpness and softness, steel and sentiment. You pull it out, curious. It's tied with a ribbon pale blue, fraying at the edges. You didn't put it there. Dark brown, curled slightly at the ends, tied with another blue thread that matches the ribbon. Your breath catches just for a moment. You hesitate, untie it slowly. Inside is a small, crumpled twist of waxed linen. You unfold it with your fingertips. And there it is, a lock of hair. Glance at the window to check the weather because that's what you do. It's your child's. Some people wore it in lockets, others buried it in the walls to keep spirits at bay. Historians are still debating whether these traditions were born out of deep sentiment or a need to control anything in a world where almost nothing could be held onto. You sit back and smile, something warm and far away blooming in your chest. Hair was something people kept, you remember, as a sign of love, mourning, protection. You roll the bundle back into itself, fold it up, and slide it gently back into your apron. Some things deserve to stay close. The knife is ready now. Outside, a bird chirps in the hedge. You wipe the blade and slip the whetstone back into your apron's folds. It clinks gently against the cloth-wrapped hair. And still, your apron makes room for both. You sit again briefly. Let the ache in your knees speak its piece before ignoring it for the rest of the day. You think about how everything you need seems to end up in there eventually on purpose or by accident, like the apron knows. Like it's one step ahead of you, you laugh softly. Maybe it does. Then you shake your head, get back up, stir the stew, feed the fire. But all the while you feel at the whetstone steady and cool, and you carry on. Because that's what you do too. The market is chaos today, which is exactly why your apron strings are tied extra tight. It's not that you were worried about it falling off it, as that the pockets are stuffed full to near bursting, and if this apron loosens even an inch, you're going to be the woman who drops a wheel of cheese into a puddle again. Once was enough. You elbow your way past the baker's cart, duck under a drying line that someone thought belonged across the street, and finally reach the fishmonger who always smells like you lost a bet with the sea. It tugs at your neck, presses against your hips, and clings where the cloth has soaked up a bit too much of something soup? Rainwater? Hope? You're not sure. You pretend not to breathe too deeply. He's friendly enough, but his hands are permanently damp. It's unsettling. You untie the apron slowly, the fabric now stiff with market dust and small stains that you'll pretend are character. He slips you two small trout, slippery, glistening, and still a little twitchy. You wrap them in paper and tuck them right into the front fold of your apron, where they sag with a dull thud against your stomach. Not yours, not from anything you remember wearing. Flat and black with a small crack through its center. And the stub of a pencil no longer good for anything but biting. You instantly regret it. A trout belly is no one's idea of a pleasant perfume. But that's how it works. People used to believe they held secrets, especially the ones sewn inside cuffs or stitched into the lining of coats. Some thought they warded off spirits, others claimed they bound wishes into clothing. Historians are still debating whether the presence of these hidden buttons meant anything or if people just got creative with superstition and spare time. Your apron doesn't just carry warmth and softness and sentimental bundles. They slosh slightly. A child nearby giggles, points, and says something about fish babies. You smile, nod, and keep walking. It carries everything, including damp fish, including the small wheel of cheese you didn't drop. You wonder if she's been silently resenting you or simply replaced it without comment. Either way, you make a mental note to apologize and slip the spoon deeper inside for now. You nibble it slowly, chewing as you lean back in the kitchen chair, feet aching and face flushed from the sun and people and fishmongers, including the 2 carrots you swiped from the bottom of a pile that were probably already being eyed by someone else. Oops. You shift your weight as you walk, trying to redistribute the trout. The apron is heavy now. You reach into the right pocket, dig past a tiny notebook, a folded sprig of lavender, and yes, a spoon you forgot to return to the neighbor. It's funny how the apron has become your traveling basket, your filing system, and your guilt storage all at once. Back home, you drop the trout into a bowl with some salt and wonder how you're still hungry after smelling every food on earth for the last hour. A clink, something small falls from the hem and rolls across the floor. You bend to grab it. It's a button. You stare at it for a moment. Buttons have a strange way of showing up where they don't belong. You run a thumb over it thinking. Then you drop it into the little wooden dish on the shelf, the one that holds coins, string, a bent pin. You hang the apron by the door, the shape of it sagging with stories. Then you remember your left pocket. You reach in and there it is. A dried apple slice, slightly warm from your body heat. The day settles around you. Your apron hangs quiet and still. Until tomorrow. Today is wash day, which means that by mid-morning, your hands are already pruny, your back is staging a slow rebellion, and your apron has gone from useful tool to battlefield survivor. There's flour on one side, soot on the other, and an actual mystery smear near the hem that you've made peace with never identifying. You're at the wash tub now, sleeves rolled up, apron hiked and knotted high like a sailor's rigging. Soap suds climb your wrists while water sloshes in your boots. Made of brass with faint scrollwork around the bottom. You turn it in your fingers, water running down your wrists. You wring out a shirt, then another, then lean back to catch your breath. Or maybe her mother. The wind is strong today. You hope your apron holds. Passed down, forgotten, rediscovered, forgotten again. Pull out a clothespin, 2 actually. And oh, lovely a bent nail, a bit of string, and 1 lone dried bean. Just 1. Where are the rest? You wonder if you've accidentally started a new kind of currency in the neighborhood. 1 bean at a time. Or maybe it washed up from under the furniture during that frantic pre-guest cleaning session. You add it to the pile on the windowsill. That pile is now made up of 2 marbles, half a chalk stick, a sock without a twin, and a hair ribbon that definitely doesn't belong to you, a tiny wooden doll. Or maybe you're the one who's always trying to keep them. Just the head and torso, no arms, no legs. Somewhere in the background, a rooster screams like it's been personally offended by the sun. Most agree, though, that they were memory keepers and cloth-form witnesses to everything from spilled milk to first kisses to deathbed tears. And let us be honest, most historians have never had to pick trout scales out of their apron pleats. It's about noticing what's been hiding in the folds. What's slipped in quietly between chores and moments. The brass thimble, the single bean, the ghost doll head. You sigh, 1 painted eye. You blink. It always finds its way into your apron somehow. Like it's following you. And then from your apron pocket you hear it. A rattle. You'll need it later tonight, maybe when you patch that undershirt that is tearing again where the elbows go. You always forget about elbows. They're the silent destroyers of laundry. Not ominous, just hollow. Familiar. You reach in and pull out the culprit, a thimble, not your regular one. This one is older, heavier. It belonged to your mother. You give it a shake. A bit of sawdust falls out. Sawdust? You drop it back in. Let it stay close. You reach into your other pocket, mostly out of habit. You laugh softly to yourself, then look out at the line of clean laundry fluttering like the sails of a very determined ship. Speaking of which, it's heavier than usual. You glance down. The damp cloth clings to your legs, the weight of water, soap, and objects you forgot about sagging from every seam. You dig again. It must belong to one of the neighbor's children. It's like your apron picks up lost things. You glance at the laundry again. The wind snaps a petticoat sharply. The thing is, wash day isn't just about scrubbing and wringing and muttering about socks. There's something poetic about it. Or maybe you're just over-soaped and under-caffeinated. Either way, your apron keeps catching stories. Historians are still debating whether domestic garments like aprons were considered tools, fashion, or something else entirely. You finish the last load, fingers numb and hair clinging to your temples. You strip off the apron and hang it on a hook by the hearth to dry lopsided, still sagging from the thimble and the bean and everything else it stubbornly refuses to surrender. You pat it once. Good work, you say, as if it had a choice in the matter. Then you step out into the yard to chase the sock that just blew off the line and is now sailing merrily toward the neighbor's goose. The sun's just dipping low enough to make your kitchen feel like a warm buttered memory. The beams slant golden across the scuffed floorboards, and the smell of onion and thyme curls up from the pot like a friendly ghost. You lean back in your chair, a ladle in one hand, your apron catching stray flecks of broth like it always does. This is your favorite part of the day. Not because the work is done, it isn't, not by a long shot, but because things are momentarily quiet. The children are out chasing shadows, your neighbor isn't complaining about the state of the fence for once, and your apron for a few glorious minutes is just resting. Instantly, your shoulders relax. A few even believed rosemary in an apron pocket would keep the memory sharp. Historians are still debating whether these herbal sachets held real power or just made the laundry smell better, but either way, you're not giving this one up. Your fingers close around something soft. You pull it out slowly. No, this one's older. Rounder, worn smooth in places. The hush of things waiting in the dark. You haven't gone up there in ages. Maybe this key is a nudge. You glance down. The center is stained a dusky rose where a beak got too bold earlier. You sigh, grab a rag, and move toward the door. You never know what you'll have to carry next. There's a streak of flour across the top edge, and one corner looks vaguely like it fought with a candle and lost. But it's warm, and it smells like food and firewood and something you can't quite name, like time itself. Which she did. Until she tripped on the cellar stairs and turned that egg into a memory and a minor scandal. You reach into the deep right pocket. It's a sachet. Tiny, stitched from scrap linen, filled with crushed lavender and rosemary. Tomorrow? Probably something even weirder. You'd made it months ago, maybe longer, and meant to tuck it into the linens, but instead it's been living with you. Riding around in your pocket like a charm. No wonder your hands have smelled faintly floral all week. Probably from the neighbor's child who barreled through the kitchen earlier demanding a biscuit and left with two. You pick it off, flick it into the fire, and smile. But you know better. History is also smeared on aprons, hidden in pockets, and tangled in the soft folds of cloth that cling to ordinary days. It doesn't matter. That's what it's for. You press it to your nose and breathe in. Herbs weren't just for seasoning, you know. Women in your time stitched them into clothing to ward off illness, to perfume the air, to bring luck. You tuck it back in. From the other pocket, something hard jabs you. You wince. Reach in and pull out a small brass key. You stare at it for a moment, surprised. Not that you forgot it was there. You always carry a key. But the funny part is, you don't remember what this one opens. It's not for the front door or the pantry or the little chest where you keep your good scissors. You turn it in your fingers and memories press in. The creak of the attic stair, the smell of dust and forgotten letters. You slip it back in, pat your apron, and stir the stew again. Then you hear it, laughter from outside, followed by a shriek and the unmistakable sound of a boot hitting the garden fence. But not before tying the apron tighter. The thing about aprons is they adapt. Today, yours is a soup shield, an herb pouch, a key carrier. Yesterday, it held eggs and secrets. You remember when your cousin showed up last month with that goose egg in her apron, said it was the last one from the old hen, and she had to guard it like treasure. Aprons are risk zones like that. You glance at your hem and notice something caught in the stitching, a strand of hair, not yours, redder than yours, finer. These little threads, these keys, these sachets, they aren't accidents. They're your living archive. They say history is written in books and carved into stone. You ladle soup into bowls, place them on the table, and wipe your hands on your apron for the 5th time in 10 minutes. As the light fades and the house fills with warm smells and familiar voices, your apron hugs your hips like a quiet friend. Still holding secrets. Still holding you. Rain again. You hear it before you see it soft, like someone whispering nonsense against the window panes. You tilt your head back from the hearth, watching the droplets gather in streaks, blurring the garden into watercolor greens and grays. Inside, everything feels damp. The air or the bread dough refusing to rise, even your apron, it clings to your waist like it's been personally insulted by the weather. You press your palms into the fabric, feeling the faint crinkle of something stashed away. It's a letter. Crumpled, not quite opened. Tucked hastily into your pocket yesterday when the postwriter passed through. Tossed into your apron because your hands were full of apples and decisions. She says it's because she keeps them in an apron pocket and the neighbor caught sight of the collection and assumed dark intentions. You laugh out loud. Then reach into your own pocket. You smooth it on the table now, the parchment damp around the edges from your own body heat. The ink has smudged just slightly, the way secrets do when they sit too long. It's from your sister, the one with too many ideas and not enough caution. You fold the page again and tuck it back into the apron's inside seam. You pull the apron tighter around your waist and grab the broom. Rainy days don't pause the crumbs. She writes in quick slants, half-formed thoughts. Sentences that begin with, "Can you believe?" and never fully explain what you were supposed to believe. Smooth and oval, dark as coffee, not from your kitchen. Today she's furious. About buttons. Pockets full of backup plans and half-formed ideas. One time you found an entire spoon you didn't remember borrowing. Another time, a beetle, still alive. You both screamed. A spice trader handed you a sample the other day. You must have pocketed it and forgotten. You hold it to your nose, faint scent of cardamom. Sometimes kept the buttons when the cloth itself fell apart. It's an evolving map of your distractions. Your minor rebellions, your embarrassments and triumphs. Entire garments were stripped down just to rescue the fastenings. It was thrift and habit and survival. No wonder women walked around with buttons rattling around in their aprons like miniature treasures. You don't even remember putting them there. You might be a button hoarder too, unintentionally. Apparently, her neighbor accused her of hoarding them. Yes, buttons. About the spice seed, the spoon, the surprise beetle. Of course you find some. 2 mismatched bone buttons, 1 shell and 1 carved from dark horn, still attached to a bit of cloth. And here's the wild part: buttons weren't cheap. Not the nice ones, you saved them. Traded them. Historians are still debating whether the button hoarding phenomenon was driven purely by scarcity or if there was also a sense of quiet, aesthetic rebellion refusing to let beauty get tossed away with a worn-out dress. Your sister ends her letter with a hasty, "Send me the thimble pattern," and a drawing of a chicken that is, frankly, unwell. Now the kitchen smells like wet wool, rising dough, and rain-soaked earth. As you sweep, something small bounces off the flagstone with a click. You bend down, a seed. It must have come from the market. You roll it between your fingers before dropping it into the jar near the hearth, the one labeled maybe. Your apron does this, it becomes the maybe, the later, the just in case. But that's the game, isn't it? The apron isn't just a garment. You lean on the broom and watch the rain thicken into a proper downpour. You think about your sister's buttons, about the letters that collect in kitchen drawers like confetti no one throws, about how every pocket carries more than it looks, about how, despite everything, this rainstorm feels kind of like an invitation. Morning light, pale as milk and just as thin, seeps through the slats of your kitchen shutters. You're up before the others again, not out of duty, but because your body simply rises with the bread dough now, no alarm needed. Just the sound of the house settling and the smell of damp ash in the hearth. You stretch, crack your back, and reach for your apron like it's armor. Not for anything in particular, just a habit. It hangs on the same peg, same fold, still holding yesterday's shape. You slide it over your head and tie it in the front, your fingers moving without thought. There, now you're dressed for business. Your hand instinctively dips into the right pocket. You come up with something unexpected, a handful of straight pins. That tracks. Outside, the chickens are already pacing like petty landlords. And inside, you're reattaching a sleeve to a child's shift with a stitch that is part muscle memory, part prayer. The work goes into your pocket when you don't trust your memory, and it waits there, pointy and patient. You've been mending last night, stitching up a hem by candlelight while half asleep. That's the danger of late-night sewing. Stockings, chemises, a pair of breeches somewhat split at the seams. You thread the needle and get to work, letting your mind wander. You remove the pins one by one and place them on the sill like soldiers lined for inspection. Then you pull the hem of your apron tight across your lap and sit down with the basket again. Sewing's meditative like that. You hum something tuneless, but then there's a sound. Folded tight, you frown, unfold it slowly. A shopping list. Your handwriting, though it looks like it was scrawled by a person halfway through a fever dream. Paper crinkling. You've had full conversations while writing these little lists, only to rediscover them weeks later and think, who wrote this nonsense? You pause, look down. Inside your apron's corner pocket, one you rarely use, there's a scrap. You once spilled half a Tnivet in your apron and walked around like a tragic ghost for a whole day. Either way, you use it. Appearances matter. You read it aloud. Soap. Bluing nails? You must have dropped it earlier. You lift the hem of your apron and sweep the floor carefully, collecting the strays. Eel. You remember buying it at a market 5 summers ago from a woman who looked like she hadn't blinked in a year. She swore it once belonged to her grandmother who stitched a shirt for a prince. That's likely a lie. But the thimble fits your finger perfectly. Peppercorns one time, a jar of preserves shattered on the shelf, and you managed to catch nearly half of it with your skirt. The floor was saved. Your dignity? Less so. One of the neighbor's children gave it to you last week in exchange for a slice of pie. She said it was luck for your chickens. The clouds are breaking, and when? Sunlight peeks through like someone testing a door. Ask Martha about the pig's foot thing. You have no memory of this list. You sigh, already picturing the apron full of clothespins and damp corners. You laugh softly to yourself. Classic. Aprons, especially yours, are where organization goes to pretend it's working. Still, it's a useful reminder. You've been needing more soap. And you're dangerously low on bluing, that powdered additive that keeps your whites looking not yellow. Historians are still debating whether housewives of your century really preferred the illusion of brightness over actual cleanliness, or if bluing just became a weird status symbol. You add a few more stitches, fold the mended shirt, and rise to check the stew pot. But halfway there crunch. You freeze. Look down. One of the pins. It's not the first time your apron saved you from disaster. You reach into the front pouch now and pull out your emergency thimble. Brass, slightly dented. You slip it on. Tap it against your teeth. Habit, your eyes drift to the window again. It's going to be a laundry day then. Which means pins, thimbles, bluing, and probably a lot of arguing with the wind. You empty the apron pockets onto the table thimble. Pins, the bizarre list, a piece of string you'll definitely forget again, and lay it flat to shake out the crumbs. Out falls something else. A tiny carved charm. It's wooden, no bigger than your thumbnail. You blink. Right. You meant to hang it by the coop. You smile and tuck it back in. The chickens will wait. After all, the apron knows where to keep things, and when. You're out by the washboard, elbows deep in suds, humming a tune you don't fully know. It has no name, no real melody, just something your mother used to hum while scrubbing the collars of your father's shirts like she was polishing bones. Now you hum it without realizing. The apron is already wet, of course. The moment you leaned forward to scrub, water found its way in like it owned the place. But that's part of the job. You've accepted that your apron will go through all 7 stages of soggy grief every time laundry day rolls around. Today, you're working on linens. Big pieces. Then you laugh at your own nonsense and remember, last market day, you were haggling over duck eggs and tucked your change into your pocket without a pouch. Tablecloths. You wonder what it bought before it found its way to you too. A candle? A tiny scandal? You stare at it in your hand wet, shining, and absolutely not supposed to be in your laundry. Pillowcases, sheets with stains shaped like maps of made-up countries. And you're halfway through wringing one out when your fingers hit something inside the wet folds. Scrub, rinse, wring, fold. Scrub, rinse, wring, fold. A scrap of parchment folded 5 times over with hash marks for every load. Now you tally for the small satisfaction of knowing how much work you've done, of proving it to yourself. A leftover from a guest weeks ago, maybe? You can't remember. Either way, it's yours now. You're laundering it, and laundry is 9/10 of ownership. You glance at it now, 11 marks already today. You add another. It is oddly soothing until the wind picks up and whips the drying line into your face like a possessed bedsheet. You pause. Frown. Reach. Out comes a silver coin. You catch it midair, surprised. Oh, that's from last winter, isn't it? When you dried herbs like they were lifelines? A real one. Not a token or a button pretending to be money. The scraps. The forgotten spice. A feather. The wind has calmed and the sun is painting shadows across the grass. You stand there, apron dripping, fingers wrinkled, watching the linen sway like sails waiting for the sea. A walnut shell, a button, a coin, a leaf that looked like a heart until it crumbled. You pull it down carefully, dusting off the lid. But you? You've always liked having just one coin. For luck. For leverage. For the feeling that you could, if needed, buy your way out of something uncomfortable. For a full second, you wonder if the apron itself is minting currency now. Your own little bank vault. Your apron caught what your mind forgot. Again, you rub the coin between your fingers. It's English. Probably a sixpence. Historians are still debating whether most 18th century women actually carried coins regularly, or if it was more common to rely on bartering eggs for soap, stitching for firewood, gossip for pie crusts. You dry the sixpence on your apron hem and slide it back into the fold of the waistband where the fabric bunches near your hip. Then you go back to scrubbing, letting the rhythm of the washboard guide you like a metronome. You shout a mild curse, immediately apologize to no one in particular, and catch the linen before it makes a break for freedom. Laundry is war. The apron takes it all wet sleeves, flapping corners, soap scum, droplets of sun-warmed water. And because of that, you keep a laundry tally in your apron pocket. You used to count silently like a monk or someone doing penance. You tuck the tally away and grab the next sheet one with a stitched name at the corner, not yours. You use your apron to pat your hands dry before heading to the next chore, starching. The starch lives in a ceramic jar you keep high on the pantry shelf, labeled with a tiny skull to prevent kitchen mix-ups. Just as you're about to scoop some out, something else falls from the shelf, a dried sprig of rosemary. You tuck the rosemary into your apron pocket without thinking. You always do that, save the small things. You're not a hoarder. You're a curator of everyday magic. And the apron? It's the museum. By the time the last sheet is hung, then you reach into your pocket one last time. Out comes the sixpence, still warm from your body. You kiss it for luck, turn once on your heel for no good reason, and toss it back in. Let the apron keep it safe. It's earned your trust. The days are long in midsummer, and so are the shadows. You're out behind the house, in the kitchen garden, apron already spotted with something green and suspiciously sticky. Your knees creak like a haunted cupboard. But you smile anyway, because this is your quiet time. Just you, the soil, and your apron full of clippings. Probably gooseberry pulp, possibly squashed bug. You don't really want to know. You bend to pluck a weed, no, 3 weeds. Somehow they've decided the cabbage bed is prime real estate. You pull it up at the corners, tucking them in to make a sort of forger's pouch, your own makeshift harvest basket. Inside, a few sprigs of mint, 1 grumpy beetroot, and a surprising number of green beans you hadn't remembered planting. You shift the load, the apron sagging like a hammock between your knees, and head toward the kitchen door. But halfway there you hear it. Snap, you freeze. You know that sound. You look down and sigh. A carrot. One of the stubby little ones, left too long in the ground, now split in half under your heel. A martyr to your distracted harvesting. You bend down, pick up the broken pieces, and tuck them into the apron with the others. Waste not. Your garden feeds you. In late summer, you'll dry enough herbs to smell like soup through October. Mint, thyme, marjoram, and something you thought was oregano, but now you're not sure. You sniff it suspiciously. Last week, it was a makeshift sling for an injured duck. No one ever told you being a housewife would require so much creativity with cloth. In winter, the pickles you put up now will save your sanity. The entire lower cupboard smelled like sour regret. Your apron smelled like it had survived chemical warfare. You soaked it in vinegar, dried it by the hearth, and eventually forgave it. This isn't hobby work, it's survival disguised as leisure. Historians are still debating whether kitchen gardens like yours were more symbolic of thrift or necessity, especially for housewives in towns where markets were close, but you know better. You keep a dried bay leaf and a cinnamon stick in there for reasons that aren't entirely logical but deeply emotional. You drop the sachet into the basket where the herbs are drying, then pause. And the apron? The apron carries all of it. Today it's a garden sack. Yesterday it was a bread warmer. You agreed because he looked so proud. You promised to keep it. A snail tumbles out, lands with a soft plop on the threshold, and retreats into its shell like it's just remembered a pressing appointment. You pick a few more beans, shake off a startled frog, and watch your apron fill again. You flick it gently into the grass. She slip her hand in the pocket and find a green bean seed, a crumbled cinnamon stick, or the pebble that looks like an egg. You pause under the eaves, loosening the apron corners to unload your haul. There's dirt under your nails and mint in your hair. The sky outside is turning the color of tea with too much milk. Inside, you empty your herbs onto a clean cloth. It smells ambitious. You glance toward your apron, now hanging limply like a tired flag from your waist, and smile. It's been through worse. Like that time you tried fermenting cabbage for the first time and forgot to burp the jars. You reach into the side pocket, the emergency spice pocket, and pull out a tiny muslin sachet. There's also a pebble? You hold it up. Small, smooth, round, right. The neighbor's boy gave it to you last Tuesday and swore it looked like a goose egg. And you did? The apron did. You return to the garden just as the sun hits its golden face, the one where everything turns honey-colored and even the weeds seem smug. The fabric is stained, patched, and pulling at the seams near the waist, but it hasn't given up on you yet. Sometimes you wonder if years from now, some great-granddaughter will find this apron folded in a trunk and marvel at how you once lived. She think, she must have been strange, and she'd be right. You walk inside, barefoot, apron heavy with the day's work. You set the herbs to dry, hang the apron on its hook, and run your hands along the worn edges of the pockets. It's only cloth, you tell yourself, but you're not entirely convinced. The firewood is damp again. You find this out the hard way when a satisfying crackle turns into a disgruntled hiss, and instead of warmth, the hearth releases a puff of smoke that smells like wet socks and disappointment. You groan and open the flue wider. Your apron, already dusted in flour and smelling faintly of lavender, is about to become a kindling carrier, again. You duck out the back door, squinting at the overcast sky. Into the apron they go. You've tied the hem into a deep pocket, a cradle for combustibles. It's the sort of gray that promises rain but never quite delivers, like a guest who lingers too long without committing to tea. The wood pile is stacked beneath a slanted roof, but not even that can save the lower logs from the creeping damp of early autumn. And mutter, "You will burn, or I swear I'll cook dinner with resentment alone." You ignore it. You reach down and start choosing the dry spit, splinters, bark, twigs like old bones, and one small log that might just behave. There's a kind of power in that, you think, hauling fire in your skirt, like some domestic Prometheus. Out comes a pencil nub and a grocery list you wrote 3 days ago and never fulfilled. Let's see, milk, onions, wax for sealing, and cheese that doesn't look judgmental. One log slips and bumps against your thigh. You grunt, adjust the knot. Torn parchment scribbled with measurements for a dress pattern you never started. The numbers are faded, smudged with what might be jam, or blood, probably jam. You think of how your apron is starting to resemble your thoughts, cluttered, warm, functional, and a little bit damp around the edges. You lean closer, letting your hands hover over the rising heat. It flares and vanishes with satisfying drama. Post-washing, pre-cooking, the lull between battles. But you've always believed that writing things down gives them weight. A little voice in ink that says, yes, I matter, even if it's just for turnips. The fire crackles innocently, as if it doesn't notice the potential for horror looming overhead. You sit back on your heels, apron still dusted with bark, and let the warmth begin to build. A bird chirps above you in polite concern. It looks around, shocked to be alive, and hops out like it owns the place. Inside, you dump your cargo onto the stone hearth and use a strip of last week's torn recipe book as kindling. The flame catches grudgingly, but it catches. It's the quiet part of the day now. Your apron lies across your lap like a pet cat, covered in crumbs and fire dust and the faint memory of this morning's tea. What can you say? This bird has been through hell. You try not to think about how this is the third animal this month that's left something behind on it. It's fine, you're fine. The apron is not fine, so have you. You're even. You reach into the right pocket without thinking. You carry it outside, open your hands, and watch it fly away like it's late for a scandal. You crumple the paper and toss it into the fire. Historians are still debating whether 18th-century women actually wrote detailed shopping lists like modern ones, or if that's a projection of contemporary routines. You pull out another folded scrap. This one's older. You don't burn this one. You smooth it flat and slide it back in. Just in case, a laugh bubbles up. Outside, the wind picks up. Inside, the fire pops, and that's when you hear the scratch. Not a rat. Not a branch, a deliberate sound. You run your thumb over the smooth grain. Scratch, scratch. It's coming from the chimney. By feel, you freeze. Then, with a puff of soot and indignity, a small blackbird flutters down into the hearth. You blink. It blinks back. Then it hops onto your apron and promptly poops on it. You say nothing. You reach out slowly, cupping your hands around the soot-covered creature. It flutters, resists, then gives up and sits quietly in your palms. Back inside, you wipe your apron with a cloth. But it is faithful. You sit again, the fire warm now, the room dim with the glow of twilight. You reach into the left pocket. There's a thimble. 2 straight pins. A snippet of lace. And oh, read a small wooden acorn carved by your uncle last spring. You don't remember when you last emptied the apron entirely. It's like cleaning out a purse from another life, and yet every item in there belongs. Not by logic. It's all just you in pieces. Rain is falling sideways today, the wind sweeping it in like it's got a personal vendetta against your windows. You lean over the sill just long enough to clip the shutter closed and immediately regret everything. Water snakes down your neck. Perfect. The fabric smells like cloves and old apples with just a whisper of last week's stew. You could bottle that scent and call it Domestic Mystery No. 5. The apron becomes your frontline defense, once again protecting your dress from flour clouds, dough scraps, and the occasional sneeze. Because nothing says culinary charm like sneezing into your elbow mid-need. You wipe your hands on the apron already damp from a leaky jar earlier and pull it tighter around your waist. Not because it's on the calendar, but because the storm's knocked out your mood for anything else. Bread feels safe. And the heat from the oven won't hurt either. It's worn smooth from years of tasting sauces and poking reluctant dumplings. One side is charred slightly, a reminder of that soup incident you've collectively agreed to forget. It's baking day. You gather your tools like a priest preparing for ritual. Wooden bowls spin with the split handle, flour tin with the dented lid. Your hands move almost automatically now. Scoop, sift, stir, the flour clings to your sleeves, the folds of your apron, even your eyelashes somehow. You mutter something to the stove and give the dough one final slap. There, good enough. Your apron is crusted with a dozen ingredients now, like a battle-worn banner. It is quiet except for the ticking clock and the drip-drip of the roof leak into the pan near the back door. You'll fix it. Eventually. If someone walked in right now, they assume you just fought off a flour monster and lived to tell the tale. You reach in, fingers brushing something soft fabric? It was going to be a sock once, back when ambition still visited you regularly. Now it's just a hopeful reminder. No yarn. A distant boom of thunder punctuates your rhythm. You hum to yourself something old and wordless and remember your grandmother doing the same. The scent of yeast and effort starts to spread warm, slightly sour, wholly comforting. Historians are still debating whether women in the 18th century sang while working out of joy, habit, or to pass encoded messages, but you suspect it. It's mostly because it kept their minds from wandering into madness while kneading rye. The dough is sticky and argumentative. You slap it down on the board and knead with the kind of passive-aggressive energy reserved for awkward in-laws. The crust is golden, split just slightly on top like it's smiling. Your apron sways with every movement, already catching little puffs of flour that rise like ghosts. The effort. The spills. The small victories. It's a record of survival, soft at the seams, a little scorched, always ready. You reach into the front pocket and retrieve the small wooden spoon you tucked in earlier. It's not really necessary, you just like having it there. You set the spoon on the table and pull out the next thing. A lemon. Right, you picked that from the kitchen window ledge. This morning with every intention of grating it into the glaze. A recipe, faded ink, nearly illegible, smudged with fingerprints, and let's be honest, possibly gravy. The instructions are vague. Add a good knob of butter. How big is a knob? Historians are definitely still debating that one. Instead, it's been traveling in your apron pocket like an emotional support fruit. You shrug and tuck it into the bowl where it can judge you from a distance. Thunder cracks again, closer this time, rattling the glass. While it rises, you boil water for tea. You sit by the window, cup steaming in hand, and watch the rain smear the outside world into a watercolor. A small weight in your pocket shifts. You pull out a tiny knitted square, unfinished. You fold it neatly and slide it into the inner seam, a kind of hidden pocket you stitched yourself one late evening when everyone was asleep and you needed to feel like you were in control of something, anything. Outside, the storm rages. Inside, you butter a pan and tip the dough into it like a lullaby. You wipe your hands on the apron again and notice something crusty near the hem. Is that glue? Oh, that's right. Yesterday, you tried to repair the broom with a mix of resin and wishful thinking. The apron bore witness. It always does. You pull out a folded scrap of paper from another pocket. You grin and tuck it back. When the bread is done, you pull it from the oven, carefully, apron doubling as hot pad, because of course it does. You feel it too. The apron, heavy with flour and fragments of your day, carries it all. You tear off a piece of bread and tuck it in the pocket for later. Because, let's be honest, you'll forget to eat otherwise. The chicken has escaped again. You realize this only after stepping outside with your apron full of feed and hearing the unmistakable squawk of rebellion from beyond the fence. It's always the same one, Henrietta, plotting her escape like a feathered criminal mastermind. You sigh, tuck the feed pouch into the crook of your elbow, and tighten your apron strings. Time for a chase. Down the path you go, boots squelching in the soft earth, apron bouncing with every step. She looks at you, you look at her. There is no fear in her eyes, only judgment. The grain spills a little from the front pocket, you relieving a trail like some overworked farm fairy. The hens behind you cluck in betrayal. Sorry, ladies, priorities. You spot her near the garden wall, standing proudly on top of your husband's prized cabbage like it's her royal perch. You squat low, spreading your arms like you're inviting a tender hug. Come on, Henrietta, let's not do this today. With a swift motion born of muscle memory and mild irritation, you scoop her up and cradle her like a squirming baby. She does not come. Just another stitch to be made later, added to the list. That apron's been patched so many times it's practically more thread than fabric. You untie the apron and shake it out over the sink. You tie it again, tighter now, like armor. Out comes a mess of feathers, 2 dead leaves, and a bent hairpin, not yours. You don't ask questions. A piece of soap you've been meaning to carve for fun. And beneath it all, a cloth sack full of dried herbs. It smells like dinners you haven't cooked yet. You pluck it up, untie the string, and a familiar scent wafts out thyme, rosemary, a hint of something you can't name. But like you, it holds together barely, stubbornly, and with a touch of flair. Instead, she flaps her wings once and bolts for the compost pile. The apron catches the spillover like a loyal assistant. The stones clink softly into a bowl. One of them is shaped like a heart. You pocket it. Why? Who knows? You just do. Today it's also a sieve. Hair wild, apron stained with chicken feed, feathers, and the remains of last night's onion stew. He takes it like treasure and vanishes into the drizzle. More complaints about her husband's gambling. More dramatic threats to run off with the cobbler, and at the bottom a recipe for absurdly indulgent plum pudding. And the ivory button you found under the dresser. Maybe it came from the neighbor's lost bonnet. Maybe it came from a coat you forgot you owned. Again, no questions. A vibration that fills the silence between raindrops. And still, you nod at your neighbor as she walks by with her parasol like nothing's strange. You've learned not to care what anyone thinks of your mid-morning chicken chases. You give chase, apron flying out like a cape. It snags on a low branch. You keep running. But what they do agree on is that aprons were rarely just clothing. They were tools, expressions, sometimes armor. Sometimes memory, it tears. You pause just long enough to check the damage, nothing fatal. You finally corner Henrietta behind the barrel of potatoes you meant to sort last week. You wipe your hands on the apron and open it to find a boy holding a letter. His hat is soaked, his boots muddy, and he looks both terrified and bored. She squawks. You squawk back. Balance is restored. As you walk back to the coop, you realize you've left the house looking utterly unkempt. Once Henrietta is safely imprisoned again or returned to her place, you return inside. You fold the apron over the chair, but you don't untie it just yet. It's too useful. And the next task begins, sorting. Your kitchen table is a museum of the week's intentions, letters to be answered, buttons to be resewn. You breathe it in. The apron becomes a portable shelf again. You slip the herb sack into the left pocket along with a bit of string. Historians are still debating whether 18th century aprons were truly as versatile as all this use for gathering, storing, cleaning, carrying, and even mourning. Yours is all of those things. You dump a sack of dried bundles onto the counter and begin sorting out the stones. Midway through your sorting, a knock rattles the door. You're not expecting anyone. Message from the village, he mumbles and hands it to you like it might explode. You thank him with a slice of the honey bread from yesterday wrapped neatly in a spare handkerchief you keep in the apron's back tie. You close the door and unfold the letter. It's from your cousin. You fold it carefully and tuck it into the apron. Later. For now, you return to the lentils. As you work, you hum again. Not a song, just a note. You press a hand to your pocket. It's full again. Feathers, herbs, a heart-shaped pebble, and a letter that might change nothing or everything. You smooth the apron down and exhale. Time for supper. There's a mouse in the flour bin. You discover this at dawn, of course, when the sky's just a smear of peach and charcoal and everything is too quiet for confrontation. You lift the lid, expecting the usual puff of powdery white, but instead you're met with two beady little eyes and a guilty face covered in dust. You blink. The mouse blinks. You both scream yours louder. There's a solid moment of silence where you consider just never opening the bin again. Maybe flour's overrated. Maybe you'll invent oatmeal bread. You slam the lid down and back away, apron swinging like a startled curtain. With a sigh and a muttered apology to the creature's ancestors, you knock twice on the lid, flip it open again, and watch the mouse scramble for its life and vanish into the woodpile. And start skipping flour into a smaller jar, the good jar, with the glass lid and rusted clasp. You wipe your hands on your apron, which is already collecting a fresh constellation of flour smudges. The mouse has left tiny tracks in the dust. You're tempted to preserve them like fossils, but reason returns. You'll deal with that later. For now, you pull the apron tighter. Breakfast waits for no rodent, though. The scent is part kitchen, part alchemy. A bit of ash falls into the pan from the chimney draft. You fish it out with your fingers. It's fine. Yours are sturdier than mine. My nephew's kite got caught in the oak again. I'm climbing up there. You'll call it smoky flavor and move on. You watch her go with mild concern and close the door slowly. You set to work boiling the barley, slicing the last of the cured pork, cracking eggs with the edge of a spoon that's seen better centuries. As you work, the apron absorbs everything. A smear of yolk near the hem, a dab of jam from a distracted taste test, the full bouquet of a morning in motion. It's not elegant, but it works. You are a woman held together by string, starch, and sheer conviction. This is starting to feel like a trend. You see the baker as boy trudging past with his basket of loaves and wonder if he should have traded for bread after all. Historians are still debating whether the songs sung in the 18th century, kitchens were folk traditions, or just made-up nonsense to distract tired minds. Either way, you hum yours like a spell. Then again, you like your own. You glance out the window. The sky's brighter now, the road just beginning to show its muddy grooves. A knock, again. For a moment, the whole kitchen smells like a bakery's heart. You flatten it on the table, smoothing out the creases, and read, "You pick them up anyway. Nothing gets wasted in the house like this." Her skirt is torn. Her hair is full of twigs. Twice in 2 days. You hesitate. You wipe your hands on the apron, sigh, and open the door to find your elderly neighbor, Maud, standing there like a slightly damp crow. Your lap, wrapped in the apron's folds, is warm. Then you tie it to the end of your apron string and knot it carefully. Safe, you pull the pockets open and sort the day's treasures. A snapped spoon handle, a blue ribbon, a bit of broken chalk. A world in miniature. If ever there was a day for indulgence, it's this one. The apron needs mending again, but now you know some holes aren't problems. Some are just places to start again. She's clutching a wooden spoon like a weapon. Can I borrow an apron string? she asks without preamble. You pause. A string? Yes, she says. There are many questions. You ask none of them. Instead, you untie the left string, holding your apron up with one hand, and pass it to her. She tucks it into her sleeve like a precious scroll, nods solemnly, and limps off toward the tree. Now you're lopsided. You tie the remaining string around to the front and pin the opposite corner to your waistband with an old clothes peg. Back to the stove. You stir the barley gently, humming a lullaby you only half remember. The apron's inner pocket rustles as you move. You reach in and pull out yesterday's folded recipe, the absurdly indulgent plum pudding your cousin swore by. Take 6 plums, dried and full of regret. You smile. That's your cousin's handwriting, all right? You begin gathering the ingredients, dropping dried fruit into your apron like you're harvesting jewels. A few pieces fall to the floor. You pause at the spice tin. You only have enough nutmeg for one more indulgence. Then you glance down at the apron, the jam, the flour, the barley splash, the missing string, and think, why not? You grate the last of the nutmeg. The scent lifts from the grater like incense. While the pudding steams, you sit in the chair by the hearth and exhale. There's a knock again. You stand slowly, curiosity piqued, and open the door to find Maud again. You say nothing. I got the kite, she announces triumphantly, then hands you back your apron string now tied around a stone. Why the stone? You ask. For luck, she says, and disappears down the lane. You close the door. You hold the stone for a moment. It dangles there now, a quiet charm against your hip. You return to your seat, pick up a bit of yarn, and begin to stitch. The apron needs mending again, but now you know some holes are problems. Some are just places to start again. The wind is rising and the skies turn that specific shade of pewter that only ever means trouble. You stand on the back step, apron gathered in both hands like a basket, watching the laundry flap wildly on the line. It's a losing battle. One stocking already hangs by a single wooden peg, threatening escape. You make a break for it, boots squishing through yesterday's puddles, apron flying. You save the stocking just in time, pinching it midair like a hawk catching a mouse. Victory. The world outside roars. Inside is your quiet storm shelter. You drop the wet laundry into the wash tub, untie the apron, and wring it out over the sink. Water patters against tin like a lullaby played too fast. As you begin pulling everything off the line, the rain finally starts fat, deliberate drops that make that soft pock-pock against your bonnet. You work fast, bundling shirts, underthings, and one very embarrassing pair of patched bloomers into the fold of your apron, cradling them like an armful of sleepy cats. You burst back into the kitchen, soaked, triumphant, and decorated in a dozen clothespins now clinging to your apron hem like medals of domestic valor. The chicory is bitter, grounding. Like chewing on your thoughts, you know the truth is both. Yours says you work, but also that you choose to. This one is stitched with a tiny flower already faded. It was your mother's, once part of her best Sunday apron. You sew it right over the hole made by Henrietta's beak, an appropriate memorial. It says you're part of a household, but still your own captain. The wind howls louder outside, and you smile a little. The house smells like iron and soap, and just the faintest trace of plum pudding from yesterday. You hang the apron on the back of the chair to dry. But even naked of it, you feel a shape on you like a shadow or a second skin. You flinch, then laugh. Lightning flickers outside. You go to the window and watch the trees bend like dancers. You feel alive. You feel warm. And a spool of red thread you've been saving for something special. You pick up your apron and study it like a map, threadbare here, stained there. Burned at the edge from that one time you leaned too close to the candle while gossiping. Your arms still move to grab its corners. Your hands still hover near empty pockets. While the laundry steams by the hearth, you sit down with the sewing box, a cup of chicory brew. It's time for more patches. You bolt it. The wind rattles but doesn't argue. You draw a tiny heart in the condensation. You cut cloth from an old skirt too small now, but still good, and start the careful work of stitching over the worst of the damage. Each patch is shaped oddly, like puzzle pieces made by a half-asleep tailor. One by one, they bloom across the fabric. Some women embroider initials, you embroider stories. You pause to drink, let it storm. Historians are still debating whether aprons held symbolic meaning in 18th century households if they marked class, or simply practicality. There's enough barley left for soup, and the last of the potatoes need to be used before they sprout limbs and start walking away. You scrape, slice, and stir. The apron absorbs every splatter, every smudge, every new mark of the day, a living calendar. You pick up the last patch. As you finish, you realize the red thread has looped in a heart entirely by accident. You leave it. Just then, thunder rolls across the valley like a bowling ball, and a picture frame clinks gently against the wall. You realize you've been holding the apron against your chest like a child clutches a blanket. It's more than clothing now. It's diary, shield, net, and nest. The door creaks open suddenly, and you turn half expecting Maud again, this time with a goat on a leash or a baby fox in her shawl. But it's only the wind, and you. You walk to the door, still holding the apron, and gently press it shut. Then you take the apron and tie it on again. Not out of necessity, but comfort, a kind of ritual. You boil more water. The windows fog. Behind you, the pot bubbles. The patched apron holds your gathered tools like always. Spoon, scrap of lace, one emergency clove of garlic. The storm pounds on. Inside, you hum. And when the soup is done, you eat it standing up, one hand resting in your pocket, your fingers curled around that lucky stone. It's still warm from your body. You wake up to sunlight doing its best impression of a polite guest spilling gently through the shutters, warming the floor without making a fuss. Outside, birds are holding their morning committee meeting in the hedge. A few particularly loud opinions about worms. Your apron hangs by the hearth where you left it last night, now dry, slightly stiff with soap, and proudly stitched with yesterday's work. You stretch, groan a little, you scoop everything into a bowl, carry it to the table, and without thinking, use your apron to grab the hot handle. The burn mark from last time reminds you, don't be cocky. And pull it on with practiced ease. Tie, fold, pat. The same ritual every morning. Possibly have. A sigh, a smile, a soft grunt of resignation. It fits you again like it never left, like it knows the shape of your day before you do. You grow what heals and what feeds. Sometimes they're the same thing. Sometimes they're mint and strawberries. The dust is unusually dramatic today, rising in great clouds like it's auditioning for a theater production. You've started listening for that. It's the house saying good morning. The broom gets tangled in your apron hem 3 times. You shrug. Too late now, it bears the mark of cider like a knight's crest. You tuck the stems into the fold of your apron, careful not to crush them. You hold it up, blink once, then drop it straight into your apron pocket without a word. You'll decide what to do with that later, maybe make it a tiny hat. And writing a letter to your cousin that you will likely never send because postage is absurd and you keep forgetting where she lives. Your apron holds the needle packet, the scissors, and a peach pit you don't remember putting there. You take it out and study it like it might reveal the future. The flame dances like it's got secrets. You lean back in your chair and rest your hands in your apron pockets. Then you toss it out the window, hoping it grows into something useful or at least confusing. Place it over the back of the chair. It's done its work again. You've carried your day in its fabric. Stitched a life one thread at a time. They smell like toothpaste and summer arguments. Further down, you snag a wild strawberry. It's barely larger than a thumbnail, but so sweet it makes your eyes water. You eat slowly, one leg tucked beneath you, apron still catching the drips. There's comfort in the sameness. On the 4th, you swear lightly under your breath and kick it aside like a disgruntled wizard. Breakfast today is humble. Oats and chicory, 1 poached egg, and half a heel of cheese that smells questionable but tastes divine. A feather, possibly from Maud's wild-looking chicken. A button shaped like a star. The corner of a note you tore off months ago that says only, "Don't forget the," and nothing else. As you eat, you look at your to-do list. It's not written down, but you know it. You could recite it in your sleep. Sweep the floor, tend the garden, wash the back stoop. Check on the neighbor's chickens. Something about jam? You start with sweeping. Once the dust settles, both figuratively and literally, you move outside. Apron already full of clippings, rags, and your favorite pair of pruning shears with the left handle wrapped in twine. The sun feels clean. You close your eyes, lift your face to it, and think, just for a moment, that things are exactly as they should be. In the herb patch, you kneel to gather mint. Historians are still debating whether 18th century gardens were primarily medicinal or practical, but you know the answer is yes. Back inside, you bundle the herbs, pin them to the beam to dry, and pause at the soft creaking of the ceiling. You pour a bit of cider into a clay mug, take a sip, and wipe your mouth with the edge of your apron before remembering it's the clean side. The rest of the day is a slow meander through chores, sorting dried beans into jars, rearranging the pantry to convince yourself you're in control at one point. You kneel to reach the lowest cupboard and discover a broken doll's head behind the flour. The afternoon sun stretches longer across the floor, and you settle at the window with some mending. Dinner comes together without much thought. Lentils, onion, a pinch of thyme. As twilight sets in, you light a single candle. Let's see what's inside tonight, a bit of yarn. A pebble that looks like a dog. You laugh quietly to yourself. Don't forget the what indeed. You sit there until the candle burns low. Until the shadows stretch long and the air turns heavy with sleep. Then, finally, you untie the apron and fold it gently. You stand, stretch once more, and whisper to the room. Don't forget that. You'll remember it in the morning. It's late. The kind of late where the fire has turned to sleepy coals and the whole house breathes slowly around you. You're not quite ready for bed, yet just hovering at the edge of sleep, like a boat nudging the dock. You run your fingers over the fabric one last time. It feels warm, even though it shouldn't, familiar, a little rough from so many washings. The stitches still hold. The patches still whisper. The apron sits folded neatly beside the bed, next to your nightdress and that lumpy lavender sachet you keep pretending still smells like lavender. You think about how many days it's seen, how many crumbs it's caught, how many tears it's quietly absorbed without comment. A third, just like you, might be cradling her apron in both hands, wondering how a square of fabric came to carry so much weight. The summer air is thick with crickets and the faint scent of someone else as bread cooling down the lane. You lean against the sill for a minute, elbows resting on wood worn smooth by decades of elbows just like yours. And how many secrets it keeps sealed tight in its seams. Tonight, the window is open just a crack. Tuck it under your pillow like a letter from someone who once knew you best. The one you tore from the bouquet at your cousin's wedding last spring. You said it would bring luck. You tucked it in and forgot it. You wonder what other housewives are doing right now. It floats for a moment, just a wisp, like a thought half remembered, and vanishes into the dark. Someone out there is probably rinsing a baby's claws in a basin. Another is likely picking lint from her hem. Historians are still debating whether aprons were ever considered part of a woman's identity, a true reflection of self, not just status. A soft, woven archive of scraped knees, surprise apples, ink spills, thunderclaps, and jammed thumbprints. But if they'd ever worn yours, they wouldn't have to wonder. You fold it again, this time tighter. Then you pause. You remember something. In the back pocket, one you never used, sewn tight at the edge like it's hiding. It's still there, that bit of blue ribbon. You pull it out now, smooth it with your thumb. It smells faintly of cloves and old wood. You don't know why, but it feels like the right time to let it go. You rise, pad barefoot to the window, and let the ribbon catch the breeze. Then you close the shutter softly, as if not to wake the stars. Back in bed, you pull the quilt over your knees, nestle your head into the pillow, and exhale the kind of sigh that only comes from finishing something that mattered. Your apron lies beneath your head like a quiet story. You think about all the things it carried, the clothespins, the bits of string, the herbs, the eggs, the days. It carried the days, and tomorrow it will carry more. So you smile even as your eyes drift closed. The fire glows its last. The house creaks its lullaby. And your breath slows with the rhythm of it all. Sleep comes, not all at once. Just little by little, like wool unraveling, like a hem being let down, softly, slowly, surely. You've just journeyed through the soft, hidden world of 18th century housewives, all through the quiet power of one simple object, the apron. In each pocket, fold and stitch, we found a story of survival, of routine, of humor and heartbreak and strange little comforts. You followed a rhythm of life that was intimate, ordinary, and yet remarkably sacred. From gathering eggs in the early morning mist to wrestling laundry in a thunderstorm. From trading secrets at the well to patching burns and tears with a needle and a memory, it became the map of your day, the badge of your labor, and the blanket for your thoughts. Every crumb, every pebble, every odd chicken feather, it all added to the story of a life lived by feel, by weather, and by the quiet strength of hands that knew their work. Through 22 slow, sleepy scenes, your apron became something more than cloth. And now, as you lay it down beside you, folded gently like a closing book, you understand why it mattered. Not because it was grand, but because it was yours, so rest easy now. Let the fire go cold. Let the crickets take the night shift. Tomorrow will come and you'll tie your apron again. And when you do, the story will continue pocket by pocket, thread by thread.